When did you start like getting into activism?
So inadvertently, probably around 2018 and 2019, when I started putting the pieces together that the education system was not working and something was not right. And I was told it was my child. Um, and I put the pieces together that it wasn't them, that there was a hidden disability at play. And um, it, so behind the scenes activism that way with my own family, a lot of advocating for my children. And then in about, I think it was 2020, it might have been right after COVID. So 2022, I joined the leadership series through UNH and the Institute on Disability. Um, and that program really helped me kind of find my voice and helped kind of figure out who I am again without just a caregiver, because I had given up my career because of my children's. I knew something was going on with my children. Um, by the time we litigated against our previous district, I had written 1,600 emails. And that was in a like 3-year period. But I kept being told that it was like a home-based thing, which can be really big when you have kids with hidden disabilities, that you're told that it's something you're doing or a family-based issue. And so it kind of started through the leadership series. And then after that, I did the LEND program, which is another program at UNH through the Institute on Disability. And that's leadership education on neurodevelopmental disabilities.
Wow, it's
It's
a mouthful to say the least.
it's quite a lot. But that was a fellowship program that's for graduate students at UNH, and they pair the grad students that are speech and language paths, OTs, and social workers with individuals who have real lived experience. So you come in as kind of an expert. In the fellowship, and you do the fellowship coursework like you would graduate school, but you have a different role. I was a parent representative in that program. And so that kind of really got me into policy. I did my capstone on how an LSR becomes a bill. And I really started realizing that policy is a much larger level where I could have a lot more impact. And so that is like the last couple of years how I've really stepped into that realm. So now I'm on the New Hampshire Council for Developmental Disabilities as a parent rep on their policy committee. And then this year I wrote an LSR. Unfortunately, it was an expedient to legislate. Um, was 10-8. So it was
That
close.
was very
It was
close.
very close. But the bill was HB 1316, and it was to protect data privacy for autistic individuals. And I came to that last year after RFK Jr. said something about developing an autism registry. And to me, that sounded extremely terrifying.
Yeah, to you and
Um,
a lot of people, that is horrible.
yeah, so unfortunately it did not pass. Um, and I will hopefully bring it again next year because I feel that passionate about it.
I think next year you'll get it.
I hope.
I think, excuse me, I think the makeup of the Senate and the House will change drastically next year. And I think a lot of things in New Hampshire that people have been wanting will finally come. So good, good. Can I just ask, like, okay, so your family makeup, is that what pushed you into this in particular?
Yeah. So I it's in a roundabout way. I came to understand my own neurodivergence and my husband's neurodivergence through having neurodivergent children. I have three neurodivergent children. I have a 20-year-old, I have an 18-year-old and 15-year-old. My oldest and my youngest experience disability. My middle son, who's neurodivergent, does not. Um, the support needs for my oldest and my youngest are just more complex, and my middle is able to do traditional school, so he's at UNH right now. He's a freshman at
Oh, wow.
UNH. Um, yeah, there's some legislation in New Hampshire on campus open carry bills that's very scary that's coming up right now in the Senate. But he is able to do traditional education. My oldest and my youngest, we did have to had to fight for them to have an appropriate education, and that looked very different for each of them. But through understanding that my children experience disability, my husband and I put the pieces together about our own neurodivergence, and mine came about last year, as I'm aging and had been caregiving, and the stress and the toll that took on me. I started developing a lot of chronic health conditions, and my undiagnosed neurodivergence. I look back, and my mental health really started deteriorating when I was about 16 or 17. And so I've always understood that I'm a woman who struggles with mental health, but I didn't understand there was a missing piece, that I'm a neurodivergent woman who was never identified as neurodivergent and never treated for my ADHD. And so I not only am a woman that has anxiety and depression, but my ADHD was driving that anxiety, which then turned into depression because it wasn't treated appropriately. So had I been identified as a child, I may have had like a very different picture. So that's a roundabout way of how I came to kind of
Yeah.
being in the advocacy and the disability world is in 2019, I believe, my eldest son was identified as an ADHD individual, so an autistic and ADHDer. But my family is very highly masked, which means it's very hard to tell that they're not neurotypical because they are good at fawning or masking that they're disabled. They have enough skills so that they can hold it together until they can't.
Oh, that's that's got to be such a struggle for everybody involved.
It is.
And you said you have ADHD?
I do.
That's
I do.
I have it as well. I take Adderall to help me, get through the tough
This is my
parts.
first year on medication, and I texted my husband the first day I took a stimulant, and I just wrote, "It's so quiet in here." And what I was referring to is my brain. And so the way that I experience hyperactivity has always been internally. Um, and there's internally so many tabs open in my brain. Like I would say there's running 100 tabs at a time in my brain. And I think um, much like my kids have very, very unique profiles, all three of them, but I learned that two of my kids are gifted, and through my own testing learned that I have some of those things as well. And I think it was because of that in school, I was able to hide how much I struggled, um, because I could compensate for the weak executive functioning. My anxiety kind of kept everything in check.
As somebody with ADHD, I always masked my mental I don't want to say I was limited, but like what you just said,
Yeah.
100 voices in your head.
Yeah.
I always use comedy to mask like my shortcomings, if you will.
Yep.
I didn't understand, like I've always felt as an adult that I could get through this, like and that I was also special because of the ADHD, and that I could do more than the average person. But it wasn't until I was standing in line at the Navy Federal Credit Union on base at Osan Air Base in South Korea, and they had the TV on, and there was an interview on CNN, and it was the Gawker CEO, and they had asked him a question. I can't remember exact question, but his response was seared in my brain. They asked him like how he could do so much, and he said, "I have ADHD. It's kind of like a superpower." And that was the first time that I had heard somebody in a position like that kind of celebrate the ADHD. but I would imagine that he's probably medicated as well, being a CEO. But it was still it was the first time that I had listened to somebody go on national TV and say something positive
Hmm.
about ADHD.
I think what people get wrong about ADHD is it's not an inability to attend, it's the ability to attend narrowly and hyper focus. And so it can be a strength, but I think what we get wrong is when um, I think we just have so much ableism in our culture that we don't really like to one frame anything as a disability because people want to distance themselves from that word. It feels so scary, and we're taught even when we're young, don't look, don't ask questions, just kind of pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so I think like what comes up for me when I hear somebody say it's a superpower, there are strengths with everything. With every neurotype, there are strengths. But with every neurotype, there are also weaknesses. And when we kind of just ignore that and we call something a superpower, it actually does more disservice.
I can see that.
And so like where I get is that like I don't experience my ADHD as disabling. I experience my mental health stuff as disabling. There's been many times as my role as caregiver that I've gone into crisis because the demands of my family have exceeded my capacity in terms of if you have a, a partner who may have some weak executive functioning and you already struggle, and being the female, um, just that archetype of being the female, there's a lot, yeah, of emotional labor that nobody talks about. Like our jobs are almost always, and this is a stereotype, but it's the numbers show it. There is the invisible hidden labor of holding the family together, regardless if you work full time or not.
Yeah,
Those
absolutely.
things don't just go away. And so when you have a partner who also has weak executive functioning, maybe weaker than yourself, and then you have 3 children with weak executive functioning, you are the frontal lobe for 5 people. And I already had a taxed nervous system growing up in an extensive amount of trauma. I have a CPTSD diagnosis as well. So I was a survivor coming into parenting, and I was already at a vulnerable state. And then you have children, and my children were born with 10 fingers and 10 toes. I was in my 20s. I didn't understand hidden disability. And so then when you compile the extra demands that one come with parenting children that you don't understand are disabled, you're screaming, help me, help me, help me at the pediatrician, at the school. And then you're told, well, you really are the problem. The home is the problem. The mental health is the problem, or your parenting is the problem. None of that was the problem. The problem was that I had multiple children who were neurodivergent, 2 of which are autistic. But it's so hidden that it was able, they were, I was gaslit to believe that it was something that I was doing as a parent. And that just compounded my already, it already compounded my traumas, I will say,
Yeah. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I love how you said like sharing a frontal lobe with 5 people.
Yeah.
That's one way to put it. That's
Yeah.
I kind of feel that a
Yeah.
lot. There has to be so many other families that potentially are going through this, will be going
There's
through
a lot
this.
of us, but we don't talk about it.
There's no groups or anything where
There,
people get together maybe or
I feel like there are some support groups. The disability community and the developmental disability community and the autism community. Um, it's interesting because for those of us who have loved ones who are more level 1 autistic, we're not disabled enough to receive the same type of supports that our area agencies and our um, some of the protective factors that individuals who have families who have loved ones with higher support needs might qualify for, things that we don't quite qualify for, but we also don't fit into the neurotypical world. And so a lot of us kind of just feel like we're piecemealing and putting things together. But there's this compounded misunderstanding that we are so close to typical that we're not struggling.
Just enough.
Yeah.
Like you could just get by.
And we don't, I'm very thoughtful about, I don't share my children's worst parts on social media. I don't share about the heartaches because I think it perpetuates the stigma. And I don't want to do that. And I don't want to share, just as I wouldn't want my partner to share stories about my most vulnerable moments.
I think that's a really good take. I don't like sharing my personal life on social media. I think we are friends on Facebook, and I don't post much because I feel like social media is a judgmental place, also a place where you can get lost in the surface. And there's so much more. And if you just post a picture, you don't know what you're going to get. Maybe it's some nasty comments, maybe it's something good. I don't want to deal with that at all. I just I don't like social media anymore. And I think it's just the world's kind of a hateful place right now. And if I were to put up stuff, like I just don't want to be in that box. So I just kind of taken myself out, and I'd imagine you feel the same.
So I use it as a platform to share some of our experiences. I never, I'm much better than I was 10 years ago, where I look back and I cringe about some of the stuff I shared.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh my God, that was not my place to do that. That was not my story to tell.
Yep.
So I walk a tightrope of, I feel like it's a place where I have a good number of people following me, and people following me specifically because of the work I do in the advocacy realm and the voice I give to parenting experiences. But I'm very good about not naming which of my children are experiencing this and making it vague enough that I think it protects them and protects our family, but sends a message. Um, so, because I do feel like what I have to say is important, and I want people to know that just because you think a family looks a certain way doesn't mean that we aren't struggling.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of American families, and obviously families outside of America that are going through this. And I think this is a huge thing of like something I really want to talk about. There's subjects out there that I want to bring to this show. And yours is at the top of my list because I know how many people suffer. Just in my local community here, I could point to 5 people that are struggling in ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and so many other things. So I'm really glad you're out there doing this stuff. You do it every day. You said you're a clinician. Like you must see. Do you just see New Hampshire families, or do you work outside the state, or
So
how does?
I can see right now individuals either in Massachusetts or New Hampshire because I am working towards my license
Okay.
because I went to graduate school when my kids were all really three little tiny beings, and I would work during the day, and my husband would meet us in the parking lot of school, my graduate school. I went to graduate school at night, and then I would put them all, we'd switch cars. He would just jump out of his car and he'd jump in the van and take them all back home. And so I finished graduate school when my littlest was in diapers. She's now a junior in high school. And so I was not able to practice because my kids started falling apart and my kids could not attend school because their needs weren't being met. I dealt with what's typically called school refusal or school avoidance. I, for almost 5 years, between two of my children, I could not get them to school. And so I kept trying to step into the workplace and I kept having to leave. Everything I did, I kept having to give up because of my children's hidden disabilities. And so my oldest is now 20. He is going to a specialized college in Putney, Vermont. They are able to meet his needs, and because of that, I've been able to step back into the workforce in 2025. So I'm working with a tremendous amount, a tremendous group of women, and the lead clinician who supervises me is neurodivergent and was very interested in having somebody who does neuroaffirming care. And so my whole lens is to really do neuroaffirming mental health care and work with a client where they're at, honoring their sensory, their cognitive, their processing differences. And so I work primarily with the population of individuals that are like my family now. So it's been really, really, really profound. But again, I'm grappling with two kids that were contending with some burnout again for my children.
Yeah.
Two of my children right now, which is I've never dealt with two of them going into burnout at the same time. And I'm praying that I don't have to leave work. So that's where I'm at right now. It doesn't stop.
That's got to be stressful.
It's terrifying.
And probably not just for you, but your partner.
I have two kids in college right now.
And I'm sure they can feel it.
And they're going through it. They're the ones going through it. So it, and a lot of the work I do is around polyvagal theory, which is like the nervous system and how the nervous system responds to stress. And as a family, we have a very, very fragile nervous system because we're all neurodivergent. And what people don't understand is neurodivergent people tend to have higher threat responses. They tend to go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn much more readily. It's the same thing if you have a trauma history or a vet. You can go into those states much more easily. And so as a family, our nervous system is just a lot more vulnerable. And so when my children aren't doing well, inadvertently, it means I'm not really doing well.
Wow. Yeah. No, I can imagine. I mean, I don't want to say lucky. I'm fortunate that I guess I haven't had to experience that part of life. And I'd imagine there's a lot of people that feel that. But there's a significant amount of people that don't, and they have to go through this. And it's nice to know that there's help out there and people that can help them wade through it. Um, is there like any kind of like future where we maybe learn how to fix this and like
I think it starts with rebuilding the structures that we have in place. And I keep thinking that maybe we are on the precipice of doing some of that, especially after this time in history. My hope is that we can rebuild. We were founded on a lot of colonialist practices and racism, and unfortunately, that feeds into ableism.
yeah.
And so a lot of the beliefs that we have are rooted in, and we're seeing that. I'm talking about propaganda when I shared with you. I have gone on the podcast That's Inclusive. We're doing our next podcast is going to be on propaganda and what we're seeing now, and even seeing RFK Jr.'s video with Kid Rock and their able-bodied individuals, in their blue jeans, and a lot of what they're pushing out around the whole milk, around Tylenol causing autism. This is propaganda, and this is propaganda to let you know that there is one right way of being in this world.
Yeah.
And that is not disabled, that is not autistic, that is not BIPOC, that is not queer, that is not trans, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, those are some of the most toxic men in our country, and men like that, they're the same. They're all toxic, they're all harmful, and I really hope that our country will learn how to box them out so they can feel what it's like to get their treatment, but to themselves. So, yes, I know the video that you're talking about, and they don't care. They don't care at all. They don't care what happens to the kids that die from no immunizations or how you feel about what they did. And I feel like that's across oh my goodness, I guess thinking about that at the larger scale, it must be so frustrating being underneath this administration because you're probably not getting any help.
And no, and I am in full transparency. When the autism registry rhetoric came out, my threat response is really very intact because I grew up in a home where there was a lot of volatility. I was always hypervigilant growing up, and that was a way I kept myself safe. And so this administration, for my nervous system, has been immensely taxing. Every day, I like to consume information because I'm an ADHDer. That's how I roll. I love stimulation. I'm chronically, doing things like going online and researching everything and reading everything, because that is a way I've learned how to manage stress in my life, especially when you have kids where you're told nothing's wrong with them.
Right.
Nothing's wrong with them. And then I literally spent, I mean, I would stay awake until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., years on end, researching everything so I could know everything. And I was the one that put the pieces together about my children. And I'm doing the same thing now because it's a way that I have been able to keep my family safe. And so the rhetoric that's coming out has real life implications for families like mine. And, you know, you asked a couple minutes ago, do I think we can get there? I think it takes every single one of us being engaged and aware and leveraging the privilege we do have to stand up. I think it is critical for every single one of us to be part of this game right now,
Yeah.
part of this challenge. And I think for those people that say, oh, I don't do politics, or you know, it's not good for my mental health. It's not good for any of us. And I do, as a clinician, want to be really thoughtful about, there are people that cannot tap in right now, but we all can play a role. It can look immensely different for all of us. It doesn't have to look the same. But I will say, when people say to me that, you know, I can't look at it or I don't get involved in politics, that is a privilege that not everybody has, because the decisions that are being made, even at the State House right now, have real life implications for families like mine. So we don't get the privilege of saying, oh, I just can't look at that or I can't read that, because it really impacts our day-to-day life.
Yeah. It's a giant cop out. We're all in a community, and what I vote for, what my neighbor votes for, it affects all of us. And I hate hearing I'm not into politics, or, oh, I'm the least political person you've ever met. Well, you need to get political, because this is life. And all those decisions in all those suits wearing and going up and making laws and telling us how to live, they have a direct effect on all of us. And sometimes it's very impactful in a negative way.
I was at the hearing for HB 1316, the bill that would have enshrined data privacy protections for autistic individuals. And it was very concerning that one man brought up to Representative Foss. Lily Foss, she was one of the sponsors of the bill. She shared her story as an autistic individual.
Lily's amazing, by the way.
And one of the representatives brought up vaccines. I think English may have been his second language, so it was a little bit hard to decipher what he was asking. But the fact that they brought up to an autistic individual who was sharing their story something about the connection between vaccines and autism.
Straight ignorance. Absolute.
And so I was so perplexed. Like I grabbed my chair. I was a bit taken aback. And then another representative, after ABLE is a disability justice organization, and their policy representative provided testimony. One of the representatives asked the policy director of ABLE, would you cure autism if you could? When she was done with her testimony, I could tell she was taken aback. And she said, you know what? I have learned so much from my autistic community members. I don't know how to answer this. You could tell it was really, she was really like, this was a strange thing for a rep to ask somebody providing policy, would they cure autism if they could?
Yeah.
He asked the chair, McDonald, if he could answer. McDonald said yes, and he leaned into his mic and said, I would cure autism if I could. Not 30 seconds later, they called me by Seana to come up, which is a full circle thing because we've gone through the spelling of my name.
Yeah, before.
And I answered, of course, because I answer to anything anybody calls me. And I got up and I could barely get through my testimony because I had been told not 30 seconds before that almost every single person in my maid family should be cured. And I need to tell you something. You cannot take autism out of my loved ones without erasing who they are as humans.
For sure.
There is no separating their autistic identity from who they are. Their autistic identity is who makes them them. And what I said in that hearing, and I will say again, is that I would choose them over and over and over and over again. What is broken is these systems and this community and this state and this country. My people are not broken. The autistic community is not broken. They are not understood and they are not supported. That's the problem.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's pretty powerful. I mean, under a beautiful world, everybody would be perfect and everybody would be great, but that's not us. That's not who we are. We all have our own
And they're
burdens.
perfect and great.
Yeah.
Like the things that have made them not perfect and not great are the education system,
Yeah.
the medical system, the employment system, going to the DMV. I mean, the nightmare. I could talk to you about going to the DMV for an hour and a half, what that experience was like when you have a non-driver. They can't conceptualize that somebody comes to get a real idea who's a non-driver. You want to talk about what's going to suppress voting?
I just did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a freaking nightmare. We had to go 4 times. I
Yeah.
have transportation. I have financial resources to write a check, right? I am able to speak. I am able to read.
Yeah.
I mean, the barriers are the problem. The fact that there's no accommodations in everyday life, that's the problem. The fact that people think autism is something that it's simply not is the problem. And then the fact that you have the whole world who's trying to separate marginalized groups and other them, that's the problem.
No, that absolutely. And we do it for every group.
Every group.
Yeah.
Because if we can pit each other against each other, if we can pit one another against each other, we become weaker. And that's exactly the game plan
Most people don't understand that statement right there.
It weakens us.
The division is so powerful.
I'm getting sweaty now.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I am too. But this is a great conversation to have because so many people don't have to experience. They don't have to interact with people that are different or have a different set of DNA. How we get through that as a community, I'm not sure, because the moment you start talking about like special education and stuff like that, people are like, oh my God, my taxes are going up.
Yeah. Oh, we are like, I mean, I now am on school board. I'm in my town, and we are the pariahs, the individuals that I will call it inclusive education, because there's a movement now to not use special, because nobody's needs are special. They are just needs. We don't call anybody else's needs, so we call it inclusive education now. So I'm just there's a whole movement, Stop Special, that disabled people are putting forward. I love it. I want to push it into every community. But I am on the Facebook pages for my town, and people do not believe that individuals that are disabled should be getting a free and appropriate public education. We don't have the luxury when you have disabled children. One of my children, none of my children have intellectual disabilities, but one of my children was 3 to 4 years behind their peers and does not have an intellectual disability. And they kept telling me that this was as good as it was going to get for this child. It comes to be this child has a significant language-based learning disability, which means they have dyslexia, reading disability, dysgraphia, a writing disability, dyscalculia, a math disability, and a speech and language impairment. But they were doing grade level work with a special educator, and it was not until inclusive educator, see? But
we'll get there though.
And this is how it starts, right?
Yes.
And when you said, what do? This is what we do. We start telling our stories.
It's the conversation.
The conversation.
For sure.
And that's why I signed up, because you know what? We have to be brave and just put it out there.
Yep.
So I needed for this child now is at grade level. They went to a specialized school, which is a language-based program that was multimodal. And what that means is that it hits every sense, because this individual could not learn just auditorily. They needed visuals and they needed hands-on, much like our trades programs, right?
Yeah.
And so because they had a language-based disability, they had to feel it, kinesthetically learn, right? Like a lot of us are kinesthetic learners. And because they were in that type of classroom, they now, after 5 years, are completely at grade level. It can happen, but what had to happen was you had to not be working, advocate full time, hire an advocate, hire an attorney, and fight for that education. So think about the single parent who's working to put food on their table and maybe disabled themselves. How can they do that? Can't,
Oh, the struggles are real right
right?
now because nobody wants to give you disability money. So SSDI is very difficult to
Yeah.
achieve. It could take years. There's no support in the communities. Nobody really wants to deal with this. No, I get it. Like it's a shame. Every human being that's born on this planet deserves a shot. They deserve an investment. Nobody got to choose to be here. Nobody got to decide what their DNA looked like, which genes turned on, which genes turned off. So I'm with you on this. Even the most disabled person deserves the compassion, the love, the life that we all deserve, and so I'm with you on this, and that's why this conversation is important. How do you know, like, how many people in our community suffers, like, it just in New Hampshire at large? Do we have a number? I mean, I don't need a registry or anything, but like
No,
how
I
many
mean,
people are
honestly, like right now, if you're thinking about like the disability community at large,
Mhm.
um, I would say that I don't have specific data on that. The autistic community, I would say the numbers right now are probably 1 in 36 was the last I looked, but it's profoundly more than that. Um, I would also say that once again, they're suffering because of the systems,
right?
not because of who they are. I think that um, I think that the conversation really needs to be more that like if we unpack ableism and our own internalized ableism, like what I have recognized is that my children's and my productivity is not linked to my worth. And I think when I started really looking at the way I was raised I have my parents both have graduate degrees. My mother worked for Fortune 500 companies. My mother was very successful. Um, I was taught that the way you look, the way you speak, how educated you are the most crucial aspects of you being successful.
Perception.
An image.
Yeah.
Have when you have the kids that I have, they came out giving the middle finger to all of that. And when they are so profoundly authentic, and I think that freaks the fuck out of people. I
Yeah.
really do. I think it really freaks the fuck out of people.
Yeah.
When my daughter really struggled to brush her hair for like the first 10 years of her life. I mean, you see kids that have these great like knots and gnarly, and she struggled with clothes because of her tactile sensitivities, clothes. So she would often wear pajamas, but I had to get pajamas that had been so worn thin from thrift stores that were threadbare. And she only did well if she slept in them and then wore them the next day because she was used to them being on her body. And then you think about, how well kids are doing with teeth brushing when there might be some sensory differences. And you think about maybe the difference with not being able to meet somebody's gaze or they say hello and you have a child who doesn't respond to that hello, doesn't maybe say please or thank you, maybe runs away when somebody's talking to them. That was a big one in our family, is somebody would talk and then they would run. I didn't know what that was forever. Their nervous system was activated. When you have a language-based disability, it became really, they got flooded. Like, I don't know how to respond to this. And so when you compile what I was taught and then these children that I brought into the world, that house of cards came tumbling down for me. And it really was me unpacking my own ableism and my internal beliefs that somehow I was not doing parenting right because my kids could not do these things that other people's children were doing.
I want to ask you kind of a dark question.
Yeah.
I had a friend, his son also suffers from Asperger's, and we were just having a conversation one day. I had never thought about this at all until he had said it. He said, I'm going to leave my son to another family member in my will when it's time. And that was it. That's all he said to me. That was enough. You know, like I went home and I kind of processed that, and I thought, holy cow, you don't realize the levity of that statement till you really step through it and you think to yourself, this person can't make it on its own, on, excuse me, on their own, um, without these other people. Do you think about that at
Every
all?
day.
Really?
Every day. And my children's support needs are probably less than a lot of people that are listening to us every day, because my nervous system regulates my children's nervous system. They use me to co-regulate. Knowing that I'm there, you saw me on my phone right before you hit play.
Sure.
My phone is always on my person, and I am always one text away from my children. One text. I cannot function without a working phone and it being right next to me, because if something goes sideways, who is there? Me. Can I get sick? No. Can I die? No. It's not even an option.
Yeah.
It's not an option. And people in our families don't know, especially when it's really hidden, how to support our loved ones. It's terrifying to me.
Do
It's
you,
my greatest fear.
do you have extended family that
No,
have,
they
okay.
will not take no, I will, no, it's not an option. And so we are flying on Sunday, and my one child who's in extensive burnout, I said to them, you can stay home. If you need to stay home, just don't come. And I thought to myself, what if the plane went down? What will I do? I don't have an answer to that.
I bet you there's a lot of parents in this situation that probably feel exactly the same, right?
Yeah. I mean, and there's a lot, I mean, I think it's so hard because even if there are people that are there, even if there are financial resources, it's not the co-regulator. It's not their safe person. What that means to a nervous system that is so vulnerable, it doesn't matter that there's another house available or there's financial resource. Even that, I cannot get sick.
Yeah.
Like me, because I am their lifeline. And I'm sounding ableist right now because of what I'm saying, but they will be okay without me right now when they are vulnerable and in burnout. I am also not okay. And so what's coming up as I'm saying this, what's coming up for me is like, you're sounding ableist and gross because you're making this about them. Like, and it's my stuff. This is my trauma coming up.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like I can't even conceptualize what that would be like because we are so connected. But you also have to understand that these are individuals, like my son right now is in college. Like he is doing the things, right? But this is my trauma coming up. This is my wounds that are speaking right now, to be honest. This is all my shit.
Before you got married, before you had kids, did you deal with this stuff at all? Or is
No,
this
I've never, honestly, I don't. I think growing up, I can look back in my school where there were probably kids that were labeled like behavior kids that were neurodivergent, but I didn't know anything about. I thought autism. I made some. I I had a lot of ableism, and I still do, to work through.
I think we all do though. We're a product, I assume, of the 80s and the
Yeah,
90s.
I'm a 78. I was born in 7.
Same. And I don't remember autistic kids in school. I
They were
don't
just the.
remember them in my neighborhood. My exposure was extremely limited, and it wasn't until I became an adult and I met other adult friends that had kids that some of them were, I mean, not just autistic, but other issues as well. It's just amazing how like much that was kind of kept away in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and institutionalization is not, I mean, that was just decades before we were coming of age. And so people were really segregated. And I mean, to be honest, that's what that's what this administration wants now
Yeah.
is institutionalization and segregation. And but what I think is then that the kids that may had lower support needs were in our school, but they just weren't named because autism wasn't in the DSM until like in the 80s. So of course, when we were in grade school and then coming of age in high school, like there were kids that were identified being in inclusive education, but they didn't have necessarily that label, right?
Yeah.
But these individuals have always been part of our community. They've always been our neighbors. Um, it's just that I think they had been so segregated before.
I wonder if it's a lot like, in the 50s, like being gay and being whatever,
Mhm.
right? If you weren't normal, heterosexual, just a working person, you were probably ostracized,
Mhm.
and growing up, everybody was in the closet. Nobody wanted to come out because of the fear of like what was going to happen. I wonder if it's something like that. Everybody just kind of kept it out so you wouldn't have to deal with it.
I think it's that, but I also think, again, like the foundations and structures of our country are based and rooted in oppression of people who are deemed any sort of less than, right? And so I think it is the same as what you're saying, but it's just a different subgroup, right? Like because this country was based on white men being in positions of power. Like that
Yep.
is the roots of it. And so it would be a white non-disabled man would be what was viewed as having the most control and power, and then anybody else
Yeah. The
is
bottom.
not viewed as that. And I think like what I want to be really thoughtful of and careful of is me not using my voice to speak over those with lived experience, because I also think that's I have to be really thoughtful about that because I can have lived experience as a caregiver, um, but I'm not an autistic individual. And so I need to be really thoughtful about also not harming the community and the words I use and the choices I use. And I know the community, if they heard you say even suffer, like that would be taken as though they were suffering because of their autistic or disability, when it's really like I look at it as the suffering is just because this world is not at all equipped to meet the needs of our
This is a
neighbors.
very cruel world. Like, no matter who you are, at the end of the day, none of us are gonna get through this, unscathed. I suppose, and I can understand that. Like, but at some point, somebody has to carry the water. Somebody has to carry the voice. Somebody has to do something, right? And some marginalized groups, some, you know, I'm not saying autistic people are marginalized, but I'm saying like there are groups of people that cannot carry their own message, that they cannot fix it themselves. They need support. And I see you as somebody like that, somebody that wants to help this group, and be a voice. And I think that's impactful too. And speaking of that, there are other parents, there are other families that are clearly dealing with
And I
this.
cannot speak for them
No,
at all.
and I understand. I,
Yeah.
I have a friend, if maybe he'll listen to this episode because it'll be kind of personal, but 4 kids, all autistic.
No.
I understand the stress that him and the mom goes through on a daily basis. He tells me about the school, and he's in Nebraska, so it's even redder. It's even less helpful. What I'm wondering though is where do families turn to? Where do they get that support, that help, that the information that they know that say we're gonna get through this
Yeah.
and we're gonna be all right. Like, where do they go for that?
Honestly, I think like in New Hampshire, we have our area agencies. So, like Stratford County has their own area agency, and ours is Community Partners. Um, I think it depends kind of like I don't, I mean, I couldn't answer that outside of where I live, but I know for us, the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities is an incredible resource. We have New Hampshire Family Voices. We have the Parent Information Center. We do have UNH's Institute on Disability. We have ABLE, which is a disability justice organization. But I think I think unfortunately it really falls on families. It really, especially as our funding is getting pulled away and resources are being pulled away. And that's happening more and more right now.
Are communities coming together to kind of try to overcome that, or are they just kind of islands?
You know, I don't know that I can answer that question
That's
the
okay.
best. Yeah, I don't really know. I think you know, what I feel is important to talk about, like one thing that I feel like I haven't kind of gotten to that I had mentioned to you before,
Sure.
is that right now, like we are all being impacted by policies, even if they aren't directly targeting us, they will impact us because they don't stop with one group. They continue in New Hampshire and on the federal level. They target one group, like immigrants have been a huge target. We've seen that in the trans community. That's not going to just stop with those individuals. It's going to continue to move towards other
Yeah, they're
individuals and
coming for
other
everybody.
groups. And so I think like that's really important. And I think what you were talking about, like communities coming together, um, the Dover Dems hosted, I'm on the events committee, and we hosted a meet and greet virtually a couple weeks ago. And we had mutual aid come, we had New Hampshire ACLU come, we had immigration advocates come and speak about the work they're doing. And it was really to take a pulse on, we had environmental organizations come that were local. A lot of this was local to Dover and surrounding seacoast area. But we really kind of build our coalition to support each other. And I think that that's really big during this time because that's where the change is happening. We're seeing people push back and masses of people push back as they grow, the organizations grow. And I think that's kind of some of the work that needs to be happening right now, especially when at the State House, we aren't seeing the results that we hoped to see. You know, the last 2 years, the legislators have really not taken into consideration their constituents. The constituents are signing in on bills in opposition and they'll just vote support or vice versa. So I think it's really important for us to come together as community members.
I think that's a good point that you bring up. I testify on bills in Congress. Usually, though, somebody will call me and say, "Hey, this is going on. Can you come up?" And I'll do it. And they never vote in favor of the people. They never do anything for the communities. I'm I've had this discussion a few times on a couple episodes, but like I firmly believe the Free Staters are just here to harm us. Our state is under attack. All the people that say I'm not into politics, they have no idea what kind of harm they're doing to their community by just sitting it out. I do want to go back and just highlight community partners that you had mentioned. For those that don't know, Community Partners is an amazing organization in our community. They have day program for autistic adults and people that struggle to do it on their own. They just need a little help to get independent. Some are more independent than others. I happen to know a lot about partners because I have a family member that works there, and I get to hear about the great programs and the efforts that they're doing, and I'm really glad that those kind of things are in our community. So, do you engage with community partners at all?
So strangely, when I first moved to New Hampshire in 2001, I worked at Community Partners doing early supports and services.
Okay.
So I did birth to three at-home visits for little tiny kids with disabilities, and that was like one of my first like out of college jobs. So and then we moved to Maine for a while and came back to New Hampshire. But so strangely, I have a connection with community partners, and they helped us do some supportive decision making. So my son didn't need guardianship; he doesn't need that level of support, but he does need support around me making appointments for him and being able to speak to medical providers on his behalf. And he made it very, very clear that I was to have nothing to do with his banking. And I said, okay, that's actually a safe bet. I
Right,
actually agree with
right,
that.
right.
So supportive decision making is an alternative to guardianship where it's just a little less support, and you can change it at any time. And so they helped us get that for him and get us hooked up with vocational rehab. So yeah.
What an amazing organization. I'm so scared because they're a nonprofit and federal funding's being cut and everything else. I'm so scared of those organizations leaving our community and leaving giant holes, for us to fill in. And I don't even know if we could, I mean, those are resources that are very difficult to stand up.
The councils that I'm on and the organizations, a lot of them get federal funding and rely on grants and that type of thing. And a lot of that stuff with the whole DEI push is really under attack right now.
Yeah, I hope we can get out of this, but it has. And I don't want to go too deep into politics, but it is kind of refreshing to see some of the sentiment change across the country as we see special elections being,
Big tide turning,
yeah,
right?
is a big tie, but we still have a long ways to go before the big one. And, so I hope this energy can keep building. It's unfortunate that we have to be here because I feel like we're in a decent spot for a little while, and then the new administration came and just said we're not here to help people, and it makes me sad. It makes me sad because what's the government for then? If you're just there to bomb countries, if you're just there to just grift and take advantage of it, what's your purpose? Why do we have a government, and I'm very passionate about this. I'm so frustrated and just I want to fire them all. I want to just clean the house. I want to put real people that are serious, that want to like build the world, that want to take care of people. And
And I think right now, like what I'm seeing is that people are really scared to seek out the care they need because they don't want labels attached to their name because they can be weaponized against them. And so I think that's really important to name too, is that when people come and are getting clinical help, they're really questioning how we are coding them or the language we're using, because when you other and you weaponize certain labels, people then don't seek the help and support they. So there's going to be huge repercussions. I mean, there's going to be huge repercussions because of what ICE is doing on mental health. There's going to be huge gaps, just like there was with COVID, in people seeking out the care they need because people are scared. People don't want to leave their homes. People then, a third of students aren't going to school in Minnesota still. There are long-term repercussions for the things that are happening right now in terms of the landscape on our children's mental health and the generations to come, and the trauma that is occurring, and even the trauma vicariously through seeing these things like that children are accessing through their Snapchat or social media. Like, our children are watching. Our children are very aware of what's
absolutely.
happening.
And for those people that say, "Oh, you'll get through this like any other administration," there's a cost to this. And right now we're in the cheap phase, right? We spent $170 billion to give ICE free reign. We've spent billions on terrorizing people, on tearing down, organizations like the Department of Education. All these things are going to be rebuilt. It's going to cost so much more money than what we've paid already. This country's deficit is probably going to double to like $80 trillion by the time we fix all of this. So for those that don't care, those that don't get into politics, have your wallet open because you're going to need to pay probably about 5 times more taxes to repair all this. That's just for the people that just check in on the dollar and only the dollar. For the rest of us, therapy, reuniting families, trying to repair homes that have been busted up. That I mean the hole that we have to go down to bring people back to where we were just a year ago is,
Catastrophic.
yeah,
And it does. The tides move very slowly, right? To dismantle something takes no time for them to
yeah.
go through and just gut things and fire people.
That's easy.
But then to find people who have given their life to a career that have 30 years of lived experience, they are the expert in their field. I mean, how do you just replace those people? They've moved on. They had to move on.
I mean, they said that we've lost like something to the tune of 10,000 PhDs that just moved out of the US. 10,000 sounds like a really small number until you figure out how
They're
many people actually have
and
PhDs.
they're experts in their field. I mean,
Yeah,
with the experience and the knowledge they have.
it's
It's
an incredible
devastating.
loss that this country's we haven't even we felt it, but we haven't really felt it yet.
I don't think so
In the
either.
coming years, it's going to be a really tough walk for a lot of people. And, for somebody that doesn't have the ability to control themselves, somebody that's severely autistic or any other disabilities, they're not going to be able to do this on their own. And those people that you just mentioned that aren't going to come back or difficult to find take a long time. I'm scared of that. That's probably the most frightening part. The whole like Trump being president thing, and that sucks too. But like at the end of the day, the future is what's gonna suffer. And all these people that are celebrating, they're gonna be suffering too, and that's hard. What keeps you motivated every day to do what you do? I mean, obviously, I know there's a passion. You're a mom,
Yeah.
you're a spouse. But what like keeps you burning?
Um, I never understood my love. This sounds so cliche, but I like never understood how much I love my fellow community members and how much I care about the people I go to the gym with or the people that I sit in these different organizations with or these different councils with or just the connections I've made. And I don't want to settle for a world where any of this is okay. I don't want to settle for a world where it's okay just for me or my family because we have a certain amount of privilege that maybe other people don't have. Like I'm not okay with that. I'm just like not okay with it. And I look back like on me not understanding my own neurodivergence and I think a lot of my like justice sensitivity has kind of come through the last couple years and this last year more specifically. Like I am just not going to be quiet and I'm not going to go down without fighting. Like I've never understood, to be honest, like why people sign up for war. To me, that just, I never understood, I think, being like a true patriot. And I think now I understand what it means to like love something and envision something that could be so much better and so much more just and where everybody could actually have a voice at the table is really like important.
I think outside of like September 11th, I don't know if anybody gets excited to sign up for war. I think there was that was like the one moment. I don't want to get stuck on this. But it is an interesting thought. Like I went into the military because I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was 18 and I my girlfriend at the time was like, "You want to join the Air Force?" I was like, "Yeah, let's go." But I served 21 years and I met a lot of individuals. I think most individuals that join the military don't do it out of patriotism. I think they do it because they come from nothing, or they're looking for the educational help, or they're just looking for a path out
Which
of
just
like
makes me feel so sick thinking about these service members that could be going into. I mean,
yeah, most of them didn't
it's
sign
just
up for any of this. They just wanted a better life
yeah,
and they knew they couldn't go to college,
such a good point.
and so like what we're seeing in Iran, like I can tell you the majority of those people don't want to be there. They don't want to take part in that. And for what? So an old white guy in the White House can get money from oil and power and all that. Like it's a very personal, I guess, aspect of mine is I serve with a lot of people. When I joined the Air Force, we had 600,000 people. When I left the Air Force, we had 319,000 people. And they're just good people. Most of them were just like you and I, just trying to get a job and do it. But I get the sentiment all the same because there are some people that make a living after it, right? They write books and they make Instagram videos about, look, I got up at 3 a.m. to run 5 miles or whatever it is. The, people do things for different reasons, but I I guess inside of my head, I like to think that all people are good, but the last couple years have kind of taxed that a little bit. I'm starting to think maybe I'm wrong. And I don't know if other people feel that way. And I don't want to be pessimistic because I'm an optimistic person. I like to think that tomorrow's going to be an even better day. But man, when you see it every day in the news, like I felt what you were saying earlier about being ADHD and just constantly scrolling. I find myself at 3 a.m., trying to figure out how I solve my Meniere's disease so I can hear again. I absolutely experience what you're talking about, and I think a lot of people do. It's incredible. You get to help people, like you're in the medical field,
Health.
mental health field. I consider that medical. Is it? No.
I mean, it's healthcare, I guess. I
Yeah.
mean, it's mental health care.
I
So
feel
yeah.
like your brain is probably honestly the most important part of your body, because it regulates everything. I've been using mental health services. It's something that was really, I guess, kind of gross in the military. When you were saying like people don't want to go for fear of like how they're going to be labeled in the military, people don't go see mental health because it's a career ender. Once you go, the commanders and everybody else are like, "Oh, this guy or
It's
girl is no good
all
anymore."
the stigma. It's like the same
It's
thing with autism. It's so stigmatized. Like
yeah,
people just try to distance, just like we talked about with disability. I mean, people try to distance themselves. That's the ableism, which is at the root of all of that, including mental health, right? That we have to have a certain type of brain who can do all of these things. And
yeah,
not part of the human condition is struggling. I mean, that is part of the human
yeah,
condition, right?
absolutely. How do we get through
Like,
this thing?
right.
Yeah, that must be so rewarding though, being able to
I
help
love
people
it.
like that.
I love it. I honestly love my clients. Like I get to work with the most amazing people, and they are people that I think are just authentic and showing up for themselves and are brave for naming that they need support. And somebody who also has struggled with my mental health, like I lean into my lived experience with my clients. Like I normalize their experience. And I really have found connecting with other neurodivergent individuals to be some of the most incredible work I've ever done because I've never met a more incredible group of people, honestly. Like the majority of my friends are autistic, my life partner is. I mean, I said that to you at the beginning. I would choose them over and over and over again. They are not broken. Like, there's nothing to be fixed. Like, we all just need support. That's it.
Where do we go from here? Where do we How do we get more people help? How do we is it just elections? We just need to get the right people. Is
That, but I also think it's, I talk a lot. Like, sometimes I feel like in the mental health world, like, there's only so much self care you can do when the systems aren't adequately supporting people. And so it's getting involved. It's everybody getting involved and not necessarily like in my community, like disability doesn't touch your life and it's not something you're passionate about. What are you passionate about? Get involved, volunteer. Like that's how you make the change, and find what you're passionate about. Step in and have hard conversations, have awkward conversations, muck up, right? Like I'm sure I've said things today that I'll cringe about. Like, but that's part of the work is just showing up and having the hard conversations.
yeah, if you're constantly stopping because you're afraid to use the wrong word or something like that, I think that does more of a disservice than than having the conversation. I'd rather somebody pick me apart because like I used a phrase that maybe, wasn't that great than not have this at all. Because I want somebody to watch something like this and think, "Holy cow, this guest is talking about me. They're having a discussion about my life and this is meaningful." And you know, when people first, because you said you didn't experience this till you got married and had kids, how did you first like know how to seek help? How did you get the resources
Oh
that
my
you
gosh.
need?
So I'm going to be honest. I had my first real mental health episode when I was 16. I didn't know what was happening. I was terrified. I went to a teacher. I look back and I was so like, I'm just so blown away. I went back and I, at lunch, went in and found a teacher that was teaching me introductory psychology when I was a junior in high school. And I disclosed what was happening to me. And I thought something was very wrong with me, like very wrong with me. And they said, you need to seek mental health care. And I was like, I had never been exposed to therapy. And I didn't feel safe to tell my parents what was happening to me. Um, and I made an appointment in the 90s, would be the early 90s, and I sought psychiatric care by myself, got myself on medication. I'm just, I'm kind of a fighter. I've always had to fight to be
Was
here.
was that scary or was that freeing?
It was terrifying. When I got a diagnosis, I got diagnosed with a panic disorder in the early 90s. That was my first diagnosis. Um, I sobbed because thought I was broken. Like I thought something was really not right with me. And when I knew there was a name for what I was experiencing and that it is something that people experience, um, it normalized that so much for me. I remember just like there is a name for what this is. And at that point, I mean, I was having panic attacks around the clock. I could not, I couldn't function. I lost 20 pounds in 2 weeks. I went from a straight A student to nearly failing. It was very hard.
And this was just experiencing the panic attacks? Panic attacks. Cool. For people that have never experienced them, my father used to get them all the time before he passed, and he would call me, and he would be crying on the other end of the phone. And Dad, what's going on? And he would just muster up like, I'm having a panic attack, and I just stayed on the phone with him. I didn't care what else was going on. I just wanted to be with him. And the hard part is we were 9,000 miles
Mm.
away. I was sitting in Korea, and he was in Rhode Island, and I was trying to bridge that gap and trying to be there for him. That's really hard
Yeah.
when you have that kind of distance.
I mean, I look back and I was like a baby. I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I mean, I was getting sick, physically sick. And that was my first introduction. I was driving home one night from skiing. I was in my boyfriend's car and I threw up and that was the first time I had ever experienced any sort of like significant panic or mental health symptom. And looking back, I had been a really anxious child. I had had a lot of rumination. And I think a lot of that was a lot of sticky thinking around my ADHD, like undiagnosed. And I think that intersection of, having a really active brain, hyper empathetic, and then having a lot of trauma in my early childhood and throughout my childhood, um, I was at that intersection where I was just really vulnerable because of the things that had happened to me and the undiagnosed neurodivergence.
And I think the mental health appointment that you made probably helped.
It saved my life.
Yeah.
I'm a lifer in terms of medication. I would not be sitting here without it. I think without mental health care, like I wouldn't be here. So for me, it's a primary way that I take care of myself. And so I just, when people like talking about the military experience, like I can't understand that because it's as crucial, if not more, than a physical ailment. Your brain is an organ. Our brain is our most powerful organ. To not think that things can misfire, and there's actual science around it. That's why medication works.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I didn't go to mental health for the first time until 2016. I only had 2 sessions with the guy. He was amazing. I felt so good after it, like I was told my whole life, like, you shouldn't go to mental health. What's wrong with you? And just sitting in that chair for those couple hours was amazing. I was bummed out because he's like, well, I'm leaving next week, so I'll just book you with somebody else. And I was like, you know what? I'm good. And then, but I've reestablished care since then, and it's been very helpful. You know, um, I think a lot of people probably just don't know how to start out. Like, where do I seek help? And I think that's a
Psychology Today is a great resource for finding clinicians, local clinicians. You just literally put in your zip code, and there's a lot of therapists. And what I think other people don't know is that it's a service. You're hiring somebody. If you don't connect after maybe a handful of sessions, find somebody else.
yeah,
It's a service. And it's a service that's very unique, and all clinicians are very unique in their practice. So really want to empower people too, that like if it doesn't feel like a good fit, don't just throw in the towel. Go find somebody else. And
yeah,
and I know that's more work, but to find somebody that's a good.
for sure. I mean, you need somebody that matches your vibe. I agree with that. I don't usually get to get to this point in any show
Yeah.
here, but while we're talking about medication, in 2013, I felt like I had just seen the Gawker thing on TV, and I had somebody that was working in my office, and they were like, "You should go see a behavioral scientist." I had no idea what that person was. We had one, and I went and saw her, and that's when I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I really want people to take down the veil of oh, I shouldn't do XYZ for help. Like, go get help. But one in particular, this is what I want to bring up. They put me on Concerta
Mm.
for from 13 to
Yeah.
17, a little after.
Yeah.
Medications matter.
Mm.
And Concerta really messed me up. I had no idea. It affected everything from libido to the way I carried myself to my thoughts I had at night. I would have emotional blowouts sometimes. I went and got a phone from my wife, and for some reason, I was agitated in there. And then we walked out, we were walking home, and my wife says, "What's wrong?" And I just started crying on the street. Just not like wailing or anything, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I had realized, oh my God, I just had an episode. And so I had retired and I couldn't get the Concerta, which was a blessing. But coming back to the US and coming to New Hampshire, it was just last year. I'd asked my doctor if I could revisit my ADHD medicine, but I wanted to try something different, and she gave me Adderall. Oh my God. If you have ADHD and you're taking Concerta, please stop.
Well, I
Well,
wouldn't say
okay, okay,
that.
maybe
I
not
would
that,
not
right?
say that.
Okay,
I would
but
say that Concerta has worked wonderful for certain
for
people.
certain people, you okay,
So
thank you.
don't.
Thank you for catching me for that. Okay. But if you're having issues like I was, where you couldn't regulate your emotions, you were always agitated, I mean, you should always consider talking to your doctor about
Yeah.
any kind of medication
And
changes.
yes.
Yes, anything like that.
But what I often tell people too is sometimes it's for certain people really hard to tell our internal states,
Yes,
right? So there's something called interoception, and that's like it's a sense, it's a less commonly known sense. And for ADHDers and autistics, it can be hard for us to register what's going on in our body. And
absolutely.
sometimes our loved ones are have better reporting on how we are doing. And so checking in, what I would suggest is maybe checking in and having that communication with how does it seem like I'm doing,
Yeah,
right?
well, I had
Like,
never considered doing that because I was always in charge at work,
yep,
head of household.
yep.
I just always thought, I was good. And so you're
And
right.
I think what's important to name too is that every single person's brain chemistry is so unique,
Yes.
which is what makes medication management tricky. But one person's experience on Concerta is one person's experience,
Very
right?
anecdotal, and I
Right.
agree.
And my experience on Adderall was not the same as yours.
Really?
And so I don't use that anymore. I use something else. But so it's just important. And even our children can use like something that hasn't worked well for me might work well for them or vice versa. And so it's so unique. And I think what also is really important is when we're starting something new, not only checking in with our, our safe person, our partner, our loved one, but also keeping kind of what I tell my clients is to have like a little thing by your bed. You can just use even a number scale of how well your day was, how well you slept, how well you ate. If I was working with you, we might come up with like a little more detailed plan, but it kind of gives you some data to look back on because it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to decipher sometimes how we are doing. And you take the person's expertise, right?
Yep.
Anybody who's in a position of power over us, we're kind of like, we're going to take that medication and not then question it. And what I would tell everybody is really, unfortunately, trial and error is the way that a lot of these medications, again, I'm not a doctor, but it is kind of trial and error.
No, I mean, those are very good points. I
Yeah.
always say to my kids, like, we're just a big bag of hormones and chemicals. Like, that's what we are. And, I mean, even down to something like birth control. One birth control would not help every individual. It's all different. That's why we have so many. But I guess, okay, so let me go back to my statement and just say, if you're on Concerta and it's not making you feel good, go talk to your doctor.
Or any
Or
medication
yeah, or any
for
medication.
that matter,
Yes.
right? Yeah, totally.
When I was younger, I wasn't really aware of who I am. I wasn't really taking inventory of my day. I wasn't really thinking about the relationships that I was establishing and maintaining. I just kind of moved forward, kind of in an oblivious manner, like a bull in a china shop. But now that I'm in my 40s, approaching 50s, I think I'm well more aware. Like I take more time with people. I take more time with my thoughts. I find ways to work through things.
Trip, right?
It is.
It's
It's
in the most beautiful way.
yeah.
Like I look back and I'm like, I had no idea, like I had no business doing that. Like I just had no business doing that. And I'll probably
Yeah.
think that in
Yeah.
20 years about right now. Like
Yeah.
it's quite profound.
I was thinking the other day, this is just an aside, but like all my Facebook friends, for example, I met them all at different points in my life.
Yeah.
And I would be willing to bet that they all think of me
It's a
of
different
when I
person.
when
Of
I met
course.
them,
Yeah.
So like the 25-year-old Adam is vastly different than the 47-year-old Adam.
Right.
I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. I'm also probably the most stable I've ever been in my life. I hope people can get that way, as they age, but I know that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah.
It's must deal with all kinds of people too. You don't deal with just autistic people, or do you? Like,
Uh,
what's your focus?
so my focus is anybody who is neurodivergent.
Okay.
I also do a lot of parents of neurodivergent kids.
Oh, I bet you that's really important.
And so, but I primarily see ADHD, autistic, individuals who may have just different brain processing. So that would be like learning disabilities. It could be any sort of neurodivergence. Um, I'm kind of, because I'm back into the clinical world as now somebody who's coming back into their professional life as like an older person, like meaning I'm not a new graduate. I
Yeah.
now have this lived experience. I'm really trying to figure out exactly in my clinical role who I want to serve and what that population will look like. And I think that's going to probably be an evolution for me
Yeah.
in terms of my clinical practice. But for right now, I'm really focused on, and I think some of that is the season you are in your life. It might change as you change, right?
Yeah.
So, definitely like parents and now parents of like kids who are post-secondary, which, those that transition of leaving school, especially when you have a neurodivergent child, can look really different because not everybody is going to go off to school. Not everybody has the same opportunities. Um, and then individuals who are neurodivergent themselves, and a lot are going through that journey with me after coming to me for what they think may be more something like a mood related challenge, and then finding that there might be some neurodivergence, which I see frequently, especially in people who are closer to our age, where they have had a life history of maybe struggling with anxiety and depression, but there might be something more
Yeah.
at play, like what happened to me last year when I went to Mass General and I like got my diagnosis of ADHD, and had been I had been always the one in my relationship, in my marriage, that was the neurotypical one. And then my husband just couldn't stop laughing because he was like, "You're not so neurotypical." And I was like, "No, God, I'm
Oh,
such an asshole. I'm
you
so sorry."
you finally joined the team, is
Yes,
what.
and why we were like the yin and the yang. Like we are our neurotypes. I am extremely extroverted and chatty and run on emotion, and he's very analytical and more introverted and very practical. And we're like a moth to a flame with each other because we round each other out so beautifully. And I didn't realize that there's a whole network of us where autistics and ADHDers gravitate towards each other because they round each other out. Um, so it's a really unique, but I think not as unique as we think, story about how we came to be.
Yeah. No, that's amazing when I think about it. Like, my wife is quite the opposite of me. I'm very extroverted. I'm
Yep.
very just and she's OCD. She's very organized. She pulls the family together. I pull the family apart. I'm like, let's go do this. I'm
Yeah.
kind of spontaneous and everything else, and she keeps me level.
Yeah.
So I definitely can relate to that
Yeah.
for sure.
All the best ways. And
Yeah, yeah.
um
It's nice when we have people like that in our
yeah.
lives that
And,
that anchor us a little bit. So
and that's why I say, that part when I heard that rep that said those things before I went up, like there is nothing wrong with my family. Like there is nothing wrong with them. Like they're everything that's right in the world. It's just that we don't accommodate them for how their brains work and how they think
yeah.
and how they show up in the world. And yeah, I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky because they have just helped me and really understand what matters and what doesn't.
And that's important. That's very important. How can people how can people get involved? Like, is there places where people can get involved? Like, even if they don't have ADHD or.
A lot of great like neurodiversity movement stuff now. The Democrats just actually started. Did you see that there's a neurodiversity caucus?
No.
Yeah, they just had like one of their first meetings last week.
How many members do they have? I'm
I
curious.
I was gonna go and I couldn't make it that night because of something came up. But there's a lot of organizations. There's a lot of organizations through our schools that are doing some
Oh,
some work. Universities, there's a lot of universities that have organizations. There's, local grassroots that are
they're
doing
probably just a Google
work.
search
That's
away.
what I think. I think dependent on where our listeners like are coming from, I think just also when you meet people that are clearly like passionate in doing activism or doing advocacy, asking them how to get involved. I've had a couple clients that are like, I really, I really want to do more advocacy and tell my story. And I'm like, that's what we need, people with lived experience.
Yeah.
And again, not just caregivers, because there's a whole world of caregivers that are really doing a disservice to the way we talk about disability because it is hard. But our story sometimes trumps those with lived experience. And that's not okay. It's not okay for my voice to be louder than my children's voice. It's not. And I have to be careful of that. That's something that I'm kind of always grappling with because I am that person that we just named, that more extroverted and passionate. And what's really important is to have people who should be at the table sharing their experience.
I come from, a different aspect. Like I don't deal with autism on a day-to-day basis. I don't have any insight. So in my world, when you say your voice shouldn't be louder, I think the opposite. I think you should be screaming for them. Somebody has to advocate, and for those that can't or
I
don't
think
want
what it
to,
is like, I think what it is like me supporting them so that they can voice. So if it's hard for setting up an appointment or finding somebody to come share their experience, like me making sure they can get there,
yeah,
me making sure I can support them. I mean, that's the beauty, I think, is that I sit down and shut up. And then the people with lived experience, I mean, I can talk about my lived experience as a caregiver, right? I can
yeah,
talk about my lived experience as an ADHDer and a trauma survivor
I
and
see what you
somebody,
mean.
but I like have to be really careful about really not getting it too in the woods with what my experience is like
Yeah,
raising autistic children. Because,
it's a different lane.
and you have to be really careful because it perpetuates this stigma that there's like it's really hard and it's really this and do them any good. It's hard because of these systems out there. It's not hard because of them. They're
Yeah,
not hard.
yeah, we just need to go out and change those systems.
Yes, but when I get in my stance like I did earlier where my own wounds from childhood come up and I get in a protective stance of to protect or save, it doesn't do them any good. They don't what I want is for them to use their voice and have the skills, and I'm going to get them there. I'm going
Yeah,
to freaking get them there. And I'm going to die and they're going to be fine. I believe it. It's just we're not quite there yet, if that makes sense.
death is just a weird concept in general, I guess. Like, because now that I'm getting older, I do think about it a little bit. Uh, I have to think to myself inside, like, the world will be okay without me.
The world is going to be okay without me, for sure.
Yeah.
For
I don't want
sure.
that to happen, but it will.
It will. And my kids will be okay. Like, because the work that I'm doing right now to have them find their voice, use their voice, like they will be okay. It's my own, that's my own stuff coming up, like my own fears, right? As parents, we just can't conceive of a world where our children struggle, one, and then possibly could struggle without us,
Yeah.
no
No,
matter who you are as a parent.
for sure.
And so for me, that just ignites my story. Just goes, ah, you can't, nothing can happen to you. But that's my work to be done, not their work. That is my nervous system regulation, and that's leaning into my own. It's not theirs to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
And I believe in them. I believe in them. I believe I believe that my kids are everything that's right in the world. Like I believe that I have created this exemplary human that just sometimes are misunderstood, but man, they have all of the capacity in the world. Like they just do.
I think everybody does to some degree. I just think that we're limited by,
Our own stuff too. Our own stuff gets in the way and our own stories and our own preconceived notions, right?
yeah, no,
Of
absolutely.
like what we were just talking about, like when I look back on what I was taught mattered, I'm still in a lot of ways dismantling that, unpacking that. And that's still my work to be done. And I say this to my clients all the time, like we all are a work in progress. My healing and my healing journey and my work will never be done. Like I'm continually doing that work with my own therapist and seeking my own care because we are constantly evolving as people and growing and having new experiences that we need to process and assimilate and make sense of.
Yeah, no, we're never finished. Never. I'm going to be somebody completely different in 20 years from now and hopefully even better. you know, and I hope everybody feels that way, obviously. Um, the government's coming for our voter rolls. The government's coming for everything that they can get to divide us further, to stomp out the needs that we need. And again, I do believe in November that we will overcome some of this hate. I don't know if it'll be enough, but like for somebody like you dealing with so much, like how do you find ways to decompress?
My tripod kitten.
What's your kitten's name?
Okay, so her her real name is Remy, but I call her Bitty Kitty because as I told you, she's 4.9 pounds. She um I strangely had somebody from the SPCA email me, called me last week, and I was like, they're gonna try to take her back.
Oh no.
My instinct was like, oh shit, they're gonna take her from me. And they called and they wanted to see how she was doing. And then they said, we have somebody that's really story. And they said that she came from Florida, Collier County in Florida. The vet that amputated her leg was her foster parent and almost kept her and wants to hear how she's doing. So I was tickled pink. I was like, she rules our entire house. I said, she is so sassy. I said, she is the boss of my golden retriever. She smacks him on the snout nonstop. And they are starting to fall for each other. It's really great. They're starting to build a connection. But I found out that she had a fishing lure in her hip, and they told me that she was likely being used as gator bait. She ran away with the hook, and the wire was up inside of a truck. They needed the fire department to come and rescue her because she was up so far in like a work type of truck. They brought her to the vet, and the vet was so connected to her. The vet ended up taking her home and fostering her and then let her go. She doesn't have a hip or a leg, so she's completely amputated like from the hip down. And this is the first time I've ever had a cat. I'm almost 50 years old. I've never had a cat. I've been terrified of cats my whole life. I was deathly allergic to cats. And 2 years ago, I said to my husband, I need a cat. As the boys were leaving for college, I was like, I think because my ovaries are like drying up and shriveling, I was like, I need to love something. My husband's like, we know that you are very impulsive. I think this might not be a great idea. You're like really allergic to cats. Meaning like I couldn't even go to extended family's house because I was so allergic. And I said, for some reason, I don't know, I like am really needing a cat. I went to the SPCA, played with all the kittens there, and I didn't have any sort of reaction. I shit you not, like I think I outgrew my allergy. Like I think I outgrew my allergy, and my body was like, it is time for this bitch to have a cat. I do not know how to make sense of it outside of that. So went to the SPCA. All of the kittens, four-legged kittens, were picked up. We were like, my daughter and I were probably like waited for over an hour to get in the kitten room. And the ones that were left were the blind one or the amputated cat. I was so drawn to the blind one, but because I have a golden retriever, I didn't feel like it was fair to bring a blind cat into a dog-friendly home. It just felt like it was not like, just didn't feel right to me. So I picked up this kitten and I was like, it's this one. And now she's mine.
How does that help with the kids? Like,
Oh my God. So, um, we are definitely bonding with her. Like I am completely smitten with her. Animals have always been a thing. My daughter's an equestrian. My son has had multiple birds. He's always wanted a cat, but I wasn't able to do a cat because I was allergic. My middle kid, of course, is deathly allergic. We're finding out, but he's at UNH right now. So I'm like, you know what? You're gonna have to wash your hands, and I'm gonna just have to do more laundry. But animals for us are so therapeutic. They're like they're our thing. Um, So in terms of taking care of myself, my tripod cat, my golden retriever, I have a 5-year-old golden retriever. My golden retriever is like the best thing ever. Like I'm a dog person, so we walk daily. Um, the fitness community, I'm really active. I work out multiple days a week. I just do like for my mental health. It's not about my body. It's about just moving and being in my body and being present and trying to be present in the moment. I
Yeah.
find that exercise is like a way that I can actually be body. Um, I love podcasts. I love to read. If I could, I would love to travel, but travel is expensive and don't
Yeah.
really have the resources. And I love, to be honest, I love my work. I love my work.
It makes a big difference. All of
Yeah.
what you just said makes a huge difference. You almost made me want to cry when you told me the cat story. I because of the military and the moving and stuff, I couldn't have animals. I just didn't want to deal with, going overseas and coming back and having to manage all that. So I just said no. And having 5 kids, they really want animals. And after retiring, coming back to New Hampshire, the first place we reached out to was the SPCA, and it was during COVID. 2020, everybody's homeschooling, everybody's working from home, everybody's stressed, depressed. And so my 2 girls approached and like, Dad, can we have a cat? And this time was different because normally I'd just say no. But then I thought about the implications of having a cat for the mental health aspect, for the bonding, for all of that. And you didn't meet him yet, but Dorian came home and he was our first cat. He's now almost 10. We got him when he was 4. And he was just a snuggly little kitty, but his owner had passed and he was in foster care. And then he was left in a box outside the SPCA for pickup. And my daughter drove around, put him in the car, and brought him home. I love my cat so much. I had such a good introduction with Dorian that our next cat was Boss. And we went to Manchester for him. His owner had died, and the surviving widow, she didn't want him, so he stayed in the basement in her house for like a year, being mistreated and not cared for. And he had a lot of issues. I had to go there 3 or 4 times to interview to have him in my house. He was 7, almost 8. Anyway, I don't want to get too lost in the cat
Yeah.
story, but I get it. And like my 4 cats, they're all rescues.
Yeah.
For my own mental health, for my own issues, and the family, they're just a blessing.
They're so grounding.
Yes.
Animals are so grounding and they're so present and they are so in the moment and they are so just happy to be in your company.
Yeah.
They require so little compared to humans that what they give you back is just it's incomparable to
Oh,
anything.
100%. They're innocent. They're perfect. Literally.
So I just like no pun intended.
Yeah.
So I literally look at my cat who is so funny. She comes into the room like Kramer, like from
Sliding in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, and she's got this, like, she's in her back because she only has one back leg and one back hip. It like kind of comes behind her, swooshing in. And then she's suddenly like in front of you. And then she is just, her presence is so hilarious. Like I found her, we have these French drains. We have a really old house. We have these French drains in the basement. And I didn't think cats really like water. Like I've never had a cat. So this is all so new to me. She has been playing in the French drains. She came up yesterday sopping wet. And then I locked her out of the basement because I'm like, this can't be good for her to be like down. I don't know exactly what is all down there, but there's a lot of stuff down there.
Yeah.
And she cried and cried and cried. And I was working virtually from home. I'm like, I have to let her down there because she's so distracting during my sessions. So, and she's just playing in the water, like loves it. So she just comes up like she's just had a big bath. And she's just brings me so much joy. And that's what we need right now is just to be present in the moment, grounded, connected to each other, connected to our animals. It's like so good.
It just feels like good advice all the way around,
Right?
to be honest.
So good. It just keeps us in the moment and reminds us like, to be connected, to be tapped into what's happening right here in front of us instead of so lost in all the noise, right?
Yeah. I'm just curious from a personal point of view, where do you go from here? Are you going to go get a PhD? Are you like
I would love to do that.
yeah?
I would love to do that. Um I love education. I love
Same.
learning.
Same
I
here.
am like a lifelong learner. Um I don't know. I've thought about state rep, but I don't know that I can do that because I've got kids that have, educational needs that are not cannot always be met easily. Like my son's in a specialized school. It's really cumbersome. And I've got another kiddo who's a non-traditional learner who would love to go to college. I'm going to make that happen. There's just not can't really do that work and not get paid.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know. I am starting I was asked to do a fellowship with Moms Rising, and I start that actually next week. I'm really excited about that. So they're a grassroots organization of primarily moms, but parents. They do a lot of policy work. They're a national group, but there's a chapter here in New Hampshire. And they had been seeing some of the disability work I'd been doing, specifically like on social media, and then seeing each other when we would go to the state house, or there would be. There was a Pete Buttigieg came to the Y recently
Hmm.
in Concord, and they asked me to come to that with them. And so we've connected, and I'm really excited to start that work. I'm really hoping that that kind of like is another area where I can do some of this.
That's a lot of good stuff going on right
It's
there.
it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting. I have to, I have to balance it with my like caregiving demands. And so when everybody's like doing really well, I can step into more spaces. But we're contending with, I think I said earlier, I don't know if I said it earlier or not, but we're contending with some burnout,
Yeah.
and the burnout for us does not look like, oh, we just need to step back for a weekend. It can look like we need to step back for a year. It
Can,
can look, yeah.
can I ask, like, I have an idea of what burnout is, but like, what does burnout?
So, autistic burnout is an ADHD burnout is it's very different than like a traditional burnout. It can be from sensory demands, cognitive load. It can be from masking, like trying to hide your disability, um, socialization. All of those things are very depleting on the nervous system and the sensory system. And so, for individuals also that have some interoception weaknesses, like I talked about, that's the ability to tell what's going on internally. Um, Often, by the time you kind of figure out that you're in burnout, you're already there.
Yeah.
You're there. And so catching it early is a challenge. And so in our house, burnout is sleep. But it's sleep. I'm not talking about 8 to 10 hours of sleep. I'm talking 15 to 20, sometimes more than 20 hours of
Complete
sleep.
like shutdown.
Yeah.
Like I need,
Yeah.
yeah.
And even sleep isn't necessarily completely restorative. So it's really thinking about, there's something called the spoon theory. And the spoon theory, a woman came about this theory thinking about her chronic illness. And she described a visual of nesting spoons, like spoons that are, you have a pinch, then you have an eighth, you have a quarter.
Yeah.
And if you think of each of those spoons as being your daily allotment of energy, that you take each spoon away, if brushing your teeth is a spoon, then having to shower is a spoon, because executive functioning is often a weakness for those of us that have ADHD and autism, and processing can be different. Our working memory can be taxed. Um, and often we just have a more fragile nervous system, so we can get thrown off easier, right? So when you think about energy expenditure or spoons, we're really having to think about what's restorative versus what's depleting. For many people, especially if interoception is weak, it can be really hard to tell what actually makes me feel restored versus more of a demand. So it means reducing demand, really reducing sensory input, really reducing our time out in community, because socialization can be so taxing,
Yeah.
reducing all of that.
Um, from the outside looking in, can you identify burnout? Like, I mean, you probably get to see it all the time, I'd imagine, or at least more than I do. But for somebody that's not in the mix, is this something that is very visual? Is this something like you can say like that person needs help?
It's
Or
so for many individuals, what I'm finding is that they don't have a diagnosis to even lean back on to inform diagnosis. I mean, burnout.
yeah,
So they're coming to me with, and this is very similar. My son wasn't diagnosed as autistic until he was in burnout. And that was the first time. And the first time he was in burnout, it took 18 months. And so that meant 18 months of not attending school, pretty much not leaving the house, food needing to be brought to them, hygiene, really reduction in hygiene. This is somebody that really enjoys showering and hygiene because that feels good to their sensory system, but it became such a demand that even that kind of fell off the table. And that's a really normal experience. People don't really talk about that because there's a lot of stigma around, losing skills. And what people don't understand is that a lot of people that are diagnosed, are actually in the throes of that. And you don't get diagnosed when you're doing well. That's the thing that happens. Often it's when the demands have exceeded capacity. So regardless if you're 3 years old, 5 years old, 15 years old, 25 years old, 50 years old, suddenly you just cannot keep up with the demands. And that's when we see people really start to kind of go into this burnout or start to have a lot of mental health symptoms. But a lot of people don't know, what autism looks like because a lot of the diagnostic criteria is based on assigned male at birth. They're working on that, making, evaluations and assessments more sensitive, especially to assigned females at birth, but they tend to be more hidden because their special interests might be something that's, very gender normative, like as a little person, it might be animals, it might be crafts, it might be dolls. And so, where if a boy was to say, "Oh, I'm really interested in the atom bomb," it's a little different than, or I'm really interested in escalators or, chemistry, and they're a small child. You're a little bit more like that's unique,
yeah.
right? But girls, it tends to be also that girls are socialized in a different way, so girls tend to mask a little better. I think I'm going on and on, but
No, no, this is
I
very enlightening. Like, I understand your passion, your commitment to all of this is incredible. Like, most people will never understand what it's like to be so selfless, to support other people and their needs. Like, this is really, really big.
So I think like, can I identify it? I have been able to put the pieces together for other people, in the clinical setting, but when it comes to my own children, I'm going to be honest that I sometimes sit so close that I don't see things so clearly. When there's an emotional connection involved, more recently, one of my other children has started to experience what I think is also burnout, and because it wasn't their story, I didn't see it until 2 or 3 days ago. I started putting the pieces together and was like, oh my God, like this is what I'm looking at. But it's so close to me. It's easier to see sometimes in my professional role than in my parenting role,
Yeah.
because I sit so close, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but that's also part of the human experience too, right? Like, we don't always get things right. We don't always,
Oh, I for sure. I mean, I look back. My son was nearly 14 diagnosed. I had master's in health. I mean, I didn't see it, but I also need to tell you that we don't learn about these things as I went to graduate school. I graduated in either 2000, I think I graduated in 2012 or 2014. I can't remember, but we had one night on ADHD. We never had one talk on the autistic experience. Neurodivergent people are going into the mental health setting, I would say at probably disproportional rates to neurotypical people but we don't even know how to identify these things really well yet. And many of us haven't had the formal training to, one, identify them, and two, how to do neuroaffirming care, care that doesn't try to that actually could be a bit harmful to them in practice, because we have to think about their sensory needs. We have to think about a different way of communicating. There's this amazing study called the double empathy problem, and that sounds really like problematic, but it's actually a problem, and it's a problem for neurotypicals and autistics. And what that study shows is that when autistics are talking to autistics, they have stronger social communication skills than neurotypicals speaking to
Is it
neurotypicals.
because they relate? They see somebody.
So I'm going to tell you, the breakdown happens
Oh, okay.
when you have a neurotypical and an autistic talking. So it's not that autistics don't have social skills, it's that their way of communicating is different. So the breakdown happens across neurotype.
I see.
So when I think about that, and then we are pushing people into all these social skills programs, who are we doing that for? We're doing that for the neurotypicals,
Yeah.
because there's more neurotypicals. We're saying that this is what it needs to look like because there's more of us, right?
Yeah.
But who is that putting all of the work on?
No, I fully, yeah, I can see
So,
that.
but my point in sharing that is
Yeah.
that really what happens is that when communication styles are different, there can be a breakdown in communication, but it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have skills. It just means that it looks different. And so it's really important, I think, for people to understand that one way of communicating isn't the right way.
Right.
And we can think about that too when people are using assistive and augmentative communication conversation. And that's when you see people using devices to verbally get their needs, okay, not verbally, but using technology
Yeah. Yeah.
as
It's so interesting when you think about like the medical world, mental health, medical, all that, and how far we've come in just like 100 to 150 years. Like 100 years ago, they just figured out if you washed your hands after surgery, people live, or before surgery,
yeah.
the people live. And we probably have so much more to explore in all of
Oh my
these
God. Yeah.
capacities.
But we're also siloed too. That's the part that's so hard, as you think about our systems are all so siloed that we're not really communicating and thinking about the whole person. We're kind of thinking about the person just in this one realm. And so it really does a disservice to us serving people as whole beings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a challenge going forward. I wish we could live hundreds of years so I can see like, what the,
It might be terrifying.
that's true too, right? It
It might
might
be
not be the
really
world.
terrifying.
Think about that movie Back to the Future where, it's a whole different world when he goes into the future. It's disgusting. Yeah.
I just keep thinking, though, we are on the precipice of possibility for things to just be dismantled in a way that we have to rebuild in a new way. And I just hope that the people that come to the table having those really profound conversations are people that are really ready to like what we have wrong and do the work to just make them more inclusive and accessible for everyone. Like, that's kind of what brings me hope, is that through these conversations, that we can start to think about ways that kind of work for everyone, because when you do some of these things, everyone benefits. And people don't always understand that. When you think about the school system, if we changed the school system so that every single person, we have universal design for learning, we do that, every single student benefits, not just the student that needs visual accommodations or visual and audio accommodations or kinesthetic learning. We have it all in one space, but it's just so expensive to rebuild these systems that we don't have the resources. And that's the part that everybody benefits when we build them correctly and we build them inclusively.
It's amazing how money can change lives like that, where if we just did it because it was the right thing to do, we'd have different results. And that goes across the board for anything. But I I'm really glad that you came over to do this show with me because, like, at the end of the day, for somebody sitting on the outside looking in, like, I understand that the world's not a kind place. I also know that it's very difficult to navigate, especially if you're a parent of kids that struggle with different conditions. In this case, we're talking about autism. I I don't know all the right words to use. I don't know a lot about that community. And so from somebody from the outside hearing, what you've brought is really eye-opening, I guess you could say. Refreshing. I hope that other people that watch this episode will hopefully have some kind of takeaway, and maybe they're just a little bit more aware, right? Or maybe they'll make a donation to a nonprofit, or maybe they'll go and advocate or testify. I I want an update in the future with you and do another episode because there's so many more questions that not only do I have now, but I'm probably going to have after reading comments
Mhm.
and hearing people's feedback about this. I am so grateful that you are strong enough to have this kind of result as a person, instead of just pulling your hair out and saying, "How am I going to get through this?" You're out here talking about it, living it, and helping other people. That's moving. It gives me a little bit of hope. We're towards the end here, and I want to give you the last word of this. Where can people either show up and help and support? Where can they find you, connect with you? Where anything that you want to leave somebody that's watching this, with something, a call to action. I'll give you it.
Yeah. So my email is simply my first name, last name at Gmail. Super easy. That would be probably the best way. Um, you know, I think that we all just have so much more power to understand. And I think I didn't really understand that for a long time, that if I kind of lean into who I am and my voice and use my voice and just have conversations with people, it really opens up your world quite a bit. Because our communities are a lot smaller, I think, sometimes than we realize. And so I think the other thing is like, if you've been wanting to do something and kind of like just mulling it over, ripping the band aid and doing it, I think is so important. And I think the more that I've just been saying yes, comfortable, um, I really believe that I'm finding my way when I do say yes, and that's not always possible. We're not always in the capacity to do that. So if that doesn't mean, you know, putting yourself out there and doing sitting in this type of format, like by no means am I saying to do that. But if it means creating art, if it means writing a poem, like if it means ha- just having a conversation you've wanted to have with somebody, but you've been putting it off, it's so different for each of us. But I also think what I want to say is to really take care of yourself right now more than anything. Like, we are living in really like unprecedented times for a lot of us. A lot of people have been living this way for a long time. A lot of marginalized groups have never felt safe. They've never felt seen. They this is the reality that they live in. But for those of us that have a certain amount of privilege, like this is the first time we've ever felt really like they do. So I think honoring yourself, I think taking care of yourself, because this is like a marathon, not a sprint, right? And you're no good to anybody unless you're really taking care of yourself. And I think a lot of that comes through like what we just talked about earlier, being present and being mindful, being really thoughtful about how much you're consuming,
Yeah.
because this is meant to overwhelm, and it's meant to kind of tax us to the point where we just kind of throw up our hands and say, I can't do it anymore. So I really want people to just kind of put their oxygen masks on them first, because you're no good to anybody else without that. Um, yeah, that's kind of what I got.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
I sincerely, this is the first episode that we're talking about like mental health and these kind of discussions are hard. they're hard to have. They're hard to listen to, I'd imagine too, for somebody that's not in there. But I want to thank you so much for coming over and doing this with me. This is this is really a strong move for that community and probably others too. We'll do it again soon. Thank you.